This is episode 7. You know who this is, David Wheatley, and you know the name of the show, David Wheatley's podcast, and welcome. I'm assuming everyone has done their homework and listened to all the preceding episodes and have paid close attention to the inflections and the punctuation. Last episode we talked about capitalism. I tried to put it in a positive light. I know some of you are unconvinced, but nevertheless, there is a positive light to it, I believe. And I mentioned at the end of 5, I don't have to say episode anymore, I'll just say 5. At the end of 5, there was a foreshadowing of altruism. And it was mentioned that was coming up. I did not cover it in episode 5, which was capitalism only, but it got pushed ahead to number 6 because capitalism was so important. So here we are at 7. Okay, I'm going to read off my screen. Altruism is the principle and moral practice of concern for happiness of other human beings or other animals, resulting in a quality of life, both material and spiritual. It is a traditional virtue in many cultures and a core aspect of various religious and secular worldviews. I like that definition. I thought originally that being altruistic was doing something nice for somebody else, for one other person. You don't have to do it, but you do it voluntarily. I'm thinking the parable of the Good Samaritan, who helped the guy who had been beat up and left for dead on the side of the road, that would be an altruistic thing to do to take care of him. And then I read another definition in the Sage Handbook that said altruism can be for a group of people as well, which seems to correspond to this definition because this definition does not say how many people are the recipients. There's a theory that says there's no such thing as true altruism as far as doing something that only benefits another person, because the person doing the giving gets to feel good about it. So there is a good and a benefit to that person as well. And some people think that it's only because of that feel good if the person giving actually does it at all. For me, I think there needs to be, on the part of the recipient, an expression of thanks. That's helpful to keep the donor continuing to donate and to not want it back. There's always that possibility that it wasn't really a true gift, that it was actually a donation. Which brings us to the definition of a loving action. A loving action is something that is done spontaneously. It's done voluntarily without coercion or pressure. It's done without expecting anything in return. So, as we can see from that, this is a high standard to engage in a loving act. The one that I admit is difficult for me is the expecting nothing in return. And in the prior example, where the person giving, whatever it is, the money to a charity expects a note or to be invited to a fundraiser or some sort of gala event, or get their name published in the annual report, or have their name announced somewhere, that really is exchange theory and not a loving act as described by this definition. Let's talk more about exchange theory because we walked right into it. Back to that example of the kid in the Hershey bar with almonds. Walks into the store, has some cash in his pocket, walks over, gets the Hershey bar, plunks it down on the counter. Person says how much it is. Kid pulls out the cash, hands it over. The clerk accepts the money, gives the change. Transaction is complete. Kid takes the Hershey bar out of the store. That's a good example of exchange theory. A willing seller, meaning the 7-Eleven owner or employee, probably the owner, and a willing buyer, the kid. And so there are seemingly endless examples of exchange theory that has gone well, but even more that have gone awry. It turns out that the Hershey bar was flawed. There weren't as many almonds as there were supposed to be, and the kid complains and brings it back, says, hey, this Hershey bar doesn't have as many almonds as advertised. And the clerk looks at it and says, well, yeah, but you ate half of it. It must have been good enough for you to eat half, so I'll give you half your money back for the other half. And society has created a system of adjudicating these types of complaints. Some people would call them breaches. Some people would call them unreasonableness on the part of one party or the other. And there is pressure for individuals to conform to the group, like we talked about in social psychology with number 4, individuals versus groups. And the group puts pressure on the individual to accept a certain level of quality on that Hershey bar, a certain size, and a certain price. And when the individual conforms to society, it goes better for the kid and for the society. That's why it's done this way. And juries are representatives of society. They're supposed to be plucked out of society. They're regular, normal people, period. You don't find many musicians or artists or painters on juries, as I understand it. It's usually the mainstream of society, school teachers, postal workers, factory workers, these types of folks who have a basic fundamental understanding of how society works and what you're supposed to get for your money with that Hershey bar with almonds, a general knowledge of society and how it's supposed to function, and a general knowledge of the law. And so this is exchange theory, back up to the conversation about capital and selling something globally and then having it be paid for. As society becomes more and more globalized, these exchanges become slightly more complicated, and also they can happen much more quickly. So consideration could be, well, if something goes bad or awry, who's going to adjudicate that? Who do the parties turn the difficulty over to have it resolved? And there are international courts, and there are also, it may say in the agreement between the two that if there is a difficulty, it will be adjudicated under the laws of a particular place, like California or New York or the US or the UK or another country. And I believe that it's commerce that brings a lot of people together for social purposes. I think people do deals just to be able to hang out together and talk about things or spend social time, a dinner or a lunch, or go to a movie or a play, hang out in the backyard, this kind of thing. And the commercial activities of exchange theory bring people together. And I like to think that most deals work out, especially if the communication is good and clear. So back to altruism. Let's say we have an individual who behaves altruistically. They have enough to meet their own needs as far as capital goes. And they have a stash of cash to use for spiritual or charitable or philanthropic purposes, and they start to mete that out, M-E-T-E that out. And they start looking around for needs, for places to do that, and find maybe a charity that has not too much being spent on overhead, but hopefully as much as possible on direct services, and that the money is actually making it to the intended recipient and used for good for the intended purpose. And there are a lot of people that give altruistically, giant amounts. Religious groups tend to give a lot of money in this area. And the ability to do so using the definition of a loving act, I think, is incredibly powerful. And I hope that our society will be able to evolve and ascend to that level so it's happening more and more. I tend to be opposed to people putting their names on buildings, but I guess if that's what it takes to get the cash, then that's probably okay. For me, I mentioned how I went to USC, and when I went there, it was just USC. But now just about everybody's building has a name on it. I don't know these people. So I hope I would like them if I met them in a backyard somewhere by invitation. And I hope that they're doing good things with the cash they have in addition to what they're doing at USC, so I can be proud of them and they of me. Okay, this is going to conclude episode 7. Please look in the description down below, patreon.com/David Wheatley, and make a donation to support this work. If you'd like to send me an email, you can do that, davidwheatley10@gmail.com. And I look forward to hearing from you, as long as there are not too many of you. Actually, as many as want to is fine with me. I'll have to get a bot to handle the demand, but we're not there yet. So until then, it's going to be personal replies. You heard me say it here. So with that said, this concludes episode 7, and thank you for joining us.